Warning, this podcast contains violence, sexuality, gore, and other horrible and disturbing things. Listener discretion is advised. Also, be aware that the hosts of this venture are ignorant dipshits, so please do not take anything they say as fact. And enjoy the show.
Now, are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then we'll begin.
Today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be.
The atoms in your left hand probably came from a different star than your right hand.
It is our basic human right to be fucked up.
A second plane now has crashed into the other tower of the World Trade Center.
Putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
The defendant shall be incarcerated for the rest of her natural life with no possibility of parole.
You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men.
We were somewhere around Barstow, on the edge of the desert, when the drugs began to take hold.
A couple days ago, I thought Agent Orange was a party drug.
What?
It's not. It takes your skin off.
Yeah.
Which is not so cool at parties.
It is not, but your orange cape is pretty cool.
That's right. I'm a superhero for today's episode. My name is Leon Filger, a.k.a. Agent Orange.
I'm Ood Gallifrey. I don't have a costume, so I'm just Ood today.
I'm Sage Murray, and I'm wearing a green sweater with the Kafka book cover on it, because I'm a big nerd.
Yeah, I can see why you might confuse Agent Orange for being a party drug, because there's so many different varieties of ecstasy and all that.
Well, I couldn't remember if LSD was the one you put in your bum or your nose. Turns out it's neither of them. I was thinking of Coke.
Oh.
Oh, Jesus.
You put Coke on your gums, too.
Which gums? Oh, those ones?
Yeah. Your teeth gums.
I did cocaine once, and there's a reason why I'll never do it again.
It's bad.
It's really bad, yeah.
That reminds me, have you heard of the newest, random internet thing?
Which one?
Yeah, which one?
Gordon Ramsay went to see how cocaine is made.
What?
Why?
I don't know. He just went to some place where they make cocaine, and he did a 44-minute episode on YouTube about how cocaine is made.
Oh,
I
that's
had a
cool.
friend who ate in one of his restaurants somewhere, and someone 2 tables over vomited, and they asked for a comp meal because it's disgusting, and the restaurant, no, we'll take 50% off as your vomit discount, but we won't comp you for free, even though they couldn't carry on with their meals because the whole restaurant stunk like vomit.
Ew.
Jesus.
That's disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I prefer, I don't know, I'll eat McDonald's sober, so my taste buds are not to trust.
Okay, so let's start the episode. And by start the episode, I mean I'm redirecting the preamble. I've decided that from here on in, all of my episodes are going to begin with called sexy questions.
Okay.
Oh, goody.
So these are, each one of you has to answer all 3 of these questions with absolute honesty.
Oh, Jesus.
Or make something up if you're boring. Just, fucked her in the eye socket or whatever it is you want to come up with.
I can be honest.
Okay, first question. Ood, strangest place you've ever had sex?
Jesus. I took one of my first girlfriends up to my parents' cabin. I think I was 16 or something like that. There was no real place to hide, so we found a tree with really thick branches, and we climbed up to the second story in the tree where the slightly smaller branches are, and there was just enough room for me to lay back and her to ride me.
Wow.
That's impressive.
That's impressive.
Sage?
A pool table. It was not pleasant. Felt burns on elbows and knees. Wouldn't recommend it.
That's
I guess I also had sex in a canoe, and that was pretty cool.
That's decent.
Yeah. You gotta be careful, though.
Yeah, true.
The rocking.
While it was on the water?
Yeah.
Oh, man. I can't turn around to grab something behind me in a canoe without tipping it over. Can't imagine fucking in one.
What about you?
On, what do they call it? The pulpit?
Yeah.
The pulpit in a church. The church was long closed down and derelict, but yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It was decent. I mean, the pulpit was hard. I was too drunk to really enjoy myself. But
wow.
Yeah.
Okay, question 2. This is the iffy one here. Ood, how old were you when you lost your virginity? And define loss of virginity. I'll give you that freebie.
I think I was 15. I got a blowjob. Does that count?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, if it counts to you, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like my first my first experience of like adult sexuality that wasn't towards a magazine.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I guess mine was when I was 14, but I didn't like have sex until I was 18. And in love and having been dated the person for a year, so I'm pretty lame.
When I was 14 years old, I was sexually assaulted by a woman in her mid-30s.
Well, that's a downer.
And that was it. That was it for me. And then I didn't have sex again until I was 19.
Oh my god.
That's
fair.
I hope it's considerably improved since then.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah.
I'm
Mrs.
happy.
Leon Filger keeps me happy.
It makes a big difference when you're not being forced into doing it.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Oh.
Okay, number 3. I'll start with Sage. Have you ever gotten caught by an authority figure?
I've ran away from cops plenty of times in high school. Never gotten caught, though.
Is this about sex again?
Yeah, it still is.
Yeah, there's totally, in the hometown I come from, I don't know, any of you that are well-versed in Saskatchewan random towns may be able to guess where I live, but there's a little Lover's Lane, kissing post, whatever you want to call it, overseeing a duck conservatory.
So romantic.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it looks like a romantic place where the water's reflecting the moon and all that, but really it's just a giant duck pond.
The mournful cries of the ducks pepper the sound of your heavy breathing and lovemaking.
So that's your answer? The ducks caught you?
No.
That would have been better.
That would have been less embarrassing.
Oh boy.
I don't know. Again, I was 17, still living at home, not any place to fuck. If her parents are home and my parents are home, so we drove my car up there. We were just getting into it when the lights were blaring in the window.
Decent.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
I was having sex in my office. I won't say where the office was. But midway through, the cops busted in. And my solution, when I saw them coming, we had like a second's worth of warning. I threw myself onto the floor to hide behind some chairs. Her solution was to stick her ass up in the air on the couch, and we both got busted.
Well, that is distracting.
Yeah.
Right?
It was terrifying. And then a couple of days later, I heard through a friend that her dad was one of the cops who busted us.
Oh my God.
The whole story about our capture was kind of kicking around circles for a while.
Jesus.
Holy shit.
I know that's still like a 1960s like Leave It to Beaver attitude and all that, but I still fear ever being caught by the dad of the person that I'm fucking. Like that's still a guttural fear to me.
Yeah, that's fair. I've been busted by my mom, but
I've never been.
Yeah.
Never?
Nope.
That's decent.
Yeah.
My mom busted me and she just looked in, apologized, and then we got dressed, and then we all pretended like nothing ever happened because we're all awkward white people.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving into Agent Orange, this is going to be a kind of heavy episode with skin falling off and whatnot. So why don't we start with What's Your Poison?
So, what's your poison?
So we're drinking Wells Banana Bread beer tonight.
It's gigantic.
Better not suck, because I like banana bread and I like beer.
I've heard people say this is strangely good. Just so the listeners can imagine it, there is a little slip cover that has 3 zippers on it, so you even undo the little slip cover
like a banana. That's fun.
Can I just drink it with the cover on?
I'm going to.
Me too.
I just wanted to try the zippers.
That's okay.
We'll get the job done.
I'm glad that it's more beerish and less banana bready-ish, because I really don't like drinking bananas. Okay, Agent Orange time, yeah?
Oh, we need to rate our beer,
Oh, fuck,
you
right,
ding-dong.
Shit.
I know, it's cold, it's nice, I like it.
It's fine. You will find that most things will be fine for me. Well, if it gets the job done, then I'm cool with it.
What was we had the first time? Was that shitty-ass...
that delicious strawberry...
That Jolly Rancher
Champagne.
Champagne. I gave that a 2. Yeah. I'll give this a 3.14.
I don't know, it just tastes kind of like Corona to me. It's kind of like...
Daniel, you try it.
Yeah. What do you think, Daniel?
Daniel did not like it.
0 out of 10 because it's a beer.
I give it like a 5. It's fine. I'm wishy-washy.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 4 because it's so light and it's so inoffensive. It's just barely a beer kind of thing.
Daily combat pitted U.S. soldiers against determined communist forces in a challenging environment. Dense foliage could conceal large groups of the enemy. The U.S. military responded to the problem by assaulting trees and brush with a potent herbicide nicknamed Agent Orange. According to the Defense Department, more than 11 million gallons of the defoliant were sprayed on the jungles of Vietnam.
If they're spraying something to kill the foliage, hey, that's a good thing.
Agent Orange did its job, but it also had long-term side effects for those exposed to the defoliant, including various forms of cancer and Parkinson's disease.
Okay, rock and roll. So this episode begins with definition of Agent Orange.
Okay.
So I checked the usual sources, Wikipedia, tarot cards, etc. And what I found out primarily is that Agent Orange is a herbicide and defoliant that was used primarily in Vietnam between 1961 and 1971 in something called Operation Ranch Hand, which was aerial spraying for the defoliation of the Viet Cong forest.
Okay.
Agent Orange consists of 2 pesticides.
Those 2 chemicals being 2,4,5-T and 2,4-D. Well, one thing that I found interesting is that Agent Orange's name wasn't coincidental. It was actually part of a family called the family rainbow herbicides. There's Agent Red, Agent White, all kinds of different agents. And the one that became most widely used because it was most effective was Agent Orange.
Agent Orange was part of Operation Ranch Hand, and the idea there is that the Viet Cong army, who had sort of descended into South Vietnam where all the fighting was going on, were using the vast, lush jungles of Vietnam to hide. And they were just really like slaughtering the hell out of U.S. troops at the time. I mean, the U.S. lost Vietnam, but it was like 1961 to 1971, many people killed in the carnage. So back in the end of the Second World War, the U.S. Army had started experimenting with ways of defoliating forests in Japan and in Japanese islands. Mm-hmm. And they came out with Agent Orange, but it wasn't ready until after the war was over and they had stuck with atomic bombs instead. So it started with, I guess, the ethics of using chemical weapons, which are like the first chemical weapons that were used. And the arguments were made that we're not trying to kill the people, we're just killing their cover. Of course, it was found out very quickly that Agent Orange is highly toxic to people, plants, and animals. Mm-hmm.
Well, I found a recording of some old school scientist on some old video explaining why Agent Orange, or one of the components of it, was good at killing the plant.
This time-lapse photography shows in a few moments the gradual killing of a common weed over a 15-day period after spraying with 2,4-D weed killer. 2,4-D is a growth regulator type of weed killer. The action is physiological, appearing to upset the plant's growth processes, causing modification and breakdown of its parts, and causing gradual but certain death.
Yeah, so at the end of the war, it was determined that there were 4 million people exposed to Agent Orange, and 1 million of them had serious health issues thereafter.
Oh my God. What kind of health issues did they have?
Well, cancer of every type, but then within a few years, it was learned that they also cause severe birth defects. So it's...
Oh, I think I've seen those videos on YouTube of the kids that were born from victims of Agent Orange.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's definitely not a party drug.
No. Definitely not.
And I guess during the course of the war, there were 31,000 kilometers worth of trees completely eliminated.
Holy shit.
Like I said, there are birth defects. There's also effects of leukemia, Hodgkin's lymphoma, other cancers. It also was particularly damaging to wildlife because not only does it kill the trees, but because the trees are completely defoliated and killed back, invasive species come back first,
right,
which chokes out reforestation efforts. And as a result, there's still mass tracts of Vietnam that don't have forests or that their forests are composed entirely of invasive non-native species. So what it was suggested by the Department of Defense when they started the offensive is we're only targeting the trees and we're targeting food crops that the Viet Cong need in order to survive. But it became known fairly quickly that they were also Agent Oranging rice paddies and food crops used by the locals. And so there was sort of a mass starvation at the time affected by the use of Agent Orange indiscriminately. And I mean, they sprayed this shit all over the place. Dudes, backpacks on the road, they had planes, they had helicopters. There were a lot of lawsuits launched many years after
No shit.
after Vietnam because the pilots and aircrew on the aircraft that were spraying Agent Orange were dying of different types of exotic cancer as a result of the exposure. And this was like decades after. There are still lawsuits pending against Dow Chemical, who are the fine folks who invented Agent Orange, and the U.S. government.
Oh my God. I can't imagine living in Vietnam at that time and then getting pregnant and having your kid end up with birth defects because of something that happened.
Well, that's exactly the type of, like, if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile that the military does. Like, if you give them a herbicide, they'll, destroy the food crops and make it into an anti-personnel weapon.
Well, it was interesting that sometime after the United Nations put together and passed a resolution called the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 3172, known as the Environmental Modification Convention. And what it states that all signatories are no longer allowed to use weapons with the purpose of destroying foliage and altering the environment. However, it doesn't say exactly what that involves, and there's a loophole so that a government can use something like Agent Orange, provided they do it to kill people and not to alter the environment.
What the fuck?
Now, there's a competing convention against the use of chemical weapons that says, no, you can use Agent Orange, but only as a defoliant, not for killing people. So, effectively, Agent Orange is ruled out by these two contradictory conventions. But at any rate, we haven't seen Agent Orange used in a military capacity since 1971, although they have used it in Brazil to clear forests used for agriculture.
Okay.
They found out that was a shitty idea. Prior to that and after that, they're using slash and burn, right? They essentially burn the forest to the ground, move in the cattle. It's killing rainforest that we need to live, but fuck, cows are big business.
Yeah, who needs oxygen?
And sexy Brazilian beef is the best beef to have. So they used Agent Orange in certain parts of Brazil, and they found that the cattle they tried to grow on the land afterward were having birth defects and were dying of cancer.
Oh my God.
So they used Agent Orange, honestly and virtuously to avoid slash and burn and the environmental consequences thereof. Ended up being a disaster because the cows were growing fifth legs.
Man, you would imagine that somebody on, that Brazilian committee would have done some research. It's like, wait, why was this banned in most of the world?
Well, there wasn't a whole lot of scientific research put together because it was not necessarily a closely guarded military secret, but all the data required by scientists in order to come to these determinations were data provided by the U.S. military.
Right.
So, who's to say? There's certainly no independent verification on the ground during Vietnam. It was all American Army scientists who were making the recordings. It was interesting that Laos and Cambodia were also Agent Oranged during the Vietnam War. Viet Cong were slipping across the border, hiding in those places. And so Operation Ranch Hand just wiped out, I can't overstate how many acres of forest. There's 31,000 square kilometers of forest that were eliminated in a decade, which was home to millions of people who are dead, millions of animals who are dead. And because the deforestation was so extensive and took place for so long, in some cases, certain areas were treated 3 or 4 times during the war.
Right.
So it knocked out entire species because there was no gap species or gap generation for them to continue. So there are huge parts of Vietnam where the native species of animals and plants have never returned and likely never will, other than invading again as now determined invasive species.
Right.
Apparently, once a plant doesn't grow there for long enough, regardless of the reason, if you bring it back, it's called an invasive species.
Oh, weird.
It tickles me that they name it something fun sounding like Ranch Hand.
Yeah. And Agent Orange, Agent Orange sounds delicious. I drink Agent Orange.
I know, I would too. I would put it in my nose.
Yeah.
That's not like if it wasn't a harmful poison, I'm sure some energy drink company would have taken that name by now.
Yeah.
For sure. And Agent Orange, and I'm glad I did the research on this, and Agent Orange isn't necessarily so toxic upon first exposure. It is. It's very toxic, but more like Lysol toxic and not so much battery acid toxic.
Right.
I think if I could use that scale. But the problem with Agent Orange is that it accumulates in the food system. So you've got your trees and plants in the food chain, then animals eat them who've also been exposed to Agent Orange, so the toxicity increases. Other animals eat those animals and the plants, toxicity increases, and it gets to the point where, like in Brazil with cattle, you've got animals that are toxic to eat because they've been put in the food chain with all this Agent Orange. And because the toxicity continues generation over generation, there are areas in Brazil and in Vietnam where they just can't grow cattle at all because there's no way to do it because there are no cattle available that haven't been tainted horribly by Agent Orange.
Like reverse homeopathy.
Exactly like that.
That reminds me of the DEET crisis that happened in the 90s where the pesticide DEET was sprayed on plants. It was eaten by insects and mice, and peregrine falcons ate those things, and pretty soon the peregrine falcons were laying eggs with shells so thin that they just fell apart upon being laid.
I had at the time, because I was concerned by reading that as well, but I had an interview with Director of Health Policy at a Canadian university. And I had said, well, I'm not going to use DEET anymore. I'll let the mosquitoes have me. And he said, I've treated patients who both experienced DEET toxicity and have experienced West Nile virus. He said, trust me, you do not want West Nile virus. Smother that DEET all over yourself, because whatever negative effects it has pales in comparison to West Nile virus, which will straight drop your ass.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
So back to the beginning of Agent Orange. It was created in 1943 and tested from 1950 to 1952. The first time it was used in South Vietnam was 1961. And the United States was using Huey helicopters at the time. The original use of Agent Orange in Vietnam was authorized by JFK in November of 1961. And it was used 62 to 71 with a total of 75.7 million liters.
Oh my God.
Now, an Olympic swimming pool holds 2.5 million liters, so they sprayed 30 times more Agent Orange than the capacity of an Olympic swimming pool over the course of 6,542 missions and covering a total of 12% of the area of South Vietnam. It was also used in concentrations 13 times the level deemed safe by the EPA, and soil concentrations today are still hundreds of times more toxic than the EPA regulations allow.
Good Lord.
Yeah, so I mean, they had used it. They had said to defoliate. The argument was, we'll make it impossible for the South Viet Cong to hide. But really, it was intended to starve them to death. Mm-hmm. Even though most of the crops destroyed were food crops for the peasants, of which 100,000 of them may have died of starvation during Vietnam. So it defoliated to fully 42% of all food crops in Vietnam.
It's devastating.
Yeah, well, after the war, there was an official acknowledgement by U.S. officials in 1966 that 4 million South Vietnamese were exposed. 3 million of them were sick. The birth defects included cleft palates and all kinds of disabilities, hernias, extra fingers and toes, etc. In the 1970s, they tested the breast milk of South Vietnamese women and found blood or traces of Agent Orange that were up to 350 times higher than you would expect in a background population. It was hundreds of times higher in soil around U.S. Air Force bases. At the time of the war, the U.S. troops and pilots who were handling the stuff were told it was harmless. Of course, later got sick, had sick babies after returning home. The legal claims by soldiers against the government started in 1977. The Department of Veterans Affairs received 39,419 claims, of which 486 have currently been paid and the rest are pending. The forests, as I said, were replaced by invasive species, which made reforestation impossible. And a total of 5.5 million people became refugees because they could no longer live on the land that was gassed with Agent Orange.
Holy shit.
They've all had to move to like northern rural settlement camps. The refugee situation continues today because their traditional homelands were...
Well, they're fucked.
They're absolutely, scorched earth.
Yeah.
Yeah, Saskatchewan has a population of 1 million, so 5 times the population of Saskatchewan.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
So eventually a $180 million settlement, 45% of which was paid by Monsanto, was given out to disabled vets, which worked out to a lifetime total of $12,000 per veteran over 10 years, which in the case of a complete debilitation is just pennies. Yeah. The Canadian connection to Agent Orange is that it was tested at CFB Gagetown in New Brunswick, and the government subsequently offered a one-time payment of $20,000 to people who were working on the base at the time and who were also told that it was harmless.
Surprise, it wasn't.
Yeah, and it was also used in the 50s through the 70s to clear vegetation in northern Ontario.
Oh, Lord.
I'm surprised that's allowed, because if you have a population that's desperate enough, waving a bunch of money in their face isn't really gaining, proper permission.
No, but I think that's the point. You don't really... I mean, when you try to kill someone, you don't really ask their permission retroactively. Would you mind that I tried to kill you? Is that okay?
My bad.
Yeah. No, I understand hush money.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a big corporation like Dow Chemical.
Right.
I mean, you've got boatloads of money. And it's disturbing because you've got big corporations and like big pharma is bad for that, where they don't really give a fuck how many people they sicken or kill because they can afford to pay those people off. And the amount of money they'll make off whatever research they do on people, guess what? That's going to cover their bills, no problem. Yeah. So they can make people sick and kill them with impunity. It doesn't matter because they're still going to turn a profit.
Yeah.
So I wanted to sort of open this up to discussion now. And this is the bit that I found interesting. I want to connect the use of Agent Orange in Vietnam to the use of chemical weapons in Syria and the use of atomic weapons at the end of World War II. So I'll pose this question in particular. The bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki effectively ended the war in the Pacific. That was the end of it. Was it justified? Because there are people who've said, and I think I'm among them, that more lives were saved by the detonation of the bombs, even though it was against a civilian population, than would have been lost otherwise with the impending invasion of Japan. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Because it's tricky. Like, there's not a right answer at all. I mean,
I don't know. I remember listening. Dan Carlin put out a 4-hour, basically thought exercise about this very question. At the end, it left me persuaded that it was just use. That I don't know. I forget the realm of philosophy I'm talking about, but in terms of lives that were lost compared to lives that are theoretically saved, it came out fairly equal. Like, the lives saved were more than the lives that died that day.
I agree. I mean, it's such a tricky...
That's a really tricky one. You don't, like, either any answer that any of us give, we sound like dicks.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, you look at the bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki were small. They paled in comparison to, like, the Tsar Bomba, for example, that Russia developed.
Right.
I mean, there are now weapons in the hands of both nations that are 1,000 times more powerful than the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. What are the ethics even of hanging on to those? Like, it seems to me that having a bomb that big that could, say, wipe out 12 million people is almost ethically the same as wiping out 12 million people, because your finger's on the trigger. You know, it's look at gun laws. If I'm walking around with a fully automatic rifle with 100 rounds in it, and I'm not doing anything useful with it, I'm just standing there on the street corner waiting for someone to piss me off. What are the ethics, even though I've done nothing wrong? What are the ethics of me standing there with 1,000 rounds in an automatic weapon? Should I even be allowed to do that? Because no good can come of it.
No.
No one hanging on to a nuclear weapon that can kill 12 million people is going to do anything nice with it.
Yeah.
What are the ethics of even owning that?
Well.
And I don't know. I guess it's partially to thank for the Cold War, that seeing the horrific consequences of using that weapon started, I guess, everybody taking a deeper look at having these weapons. But that assumes that everybody had learned the lesson from those bombings. I mean, there's countries today that seem like they're on the verge of using nuclear weapons, and I can't say that those things being used on Japan wasn't opening the door to that possibility.
Was it Oppenheimer, the fellow who was responsible for developing the bomb, had said he regretted ever having done it. And I understand that. I wonder, though, I mean, it's pretty obvious that North Korea's got nukes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they totally do.
Yeah. How do you de-escalate that? Like, I'm a pacifist at heart, and I haven't always been, but I am, and I don't like the idea of the weapons existing at all. But what are the ethics of say, us, Canada and the United States, owning weapons as a deterrent to them? And how does that get in the way of eventual disarmament? And do we even have that possibility? I know the world's nuclear arsenal is the smallest it's been in decades, but there are still enough bombs to wipe everyone out a few times over.
Yeah, and then some.
I can understand wanting to have a little bit of a safety net to keep your country safe. Like, I think taking, disarming the working class also helps them to become more susceptible to take over by the ruling class kind of thing. So I think that countries like the DPRK, like the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea, like they should. I don't blame them for having a nuke.
No, and I feel about it as like a country with nukes is kind of like a country with the death penalty. You know, they don't have to use them in order to be a deterrent. But I look at countries that do have the death penalty. And it's not a deterrent at all. The murder rates are just as high as they are in countries without the death penalty. So I wonder, let's even segue into capital punishment. What are your thoughts on capital punishment?
Well, I don't agree with it. I don't think there should be a death penalty.
I don't know. I've thought of it from a vengeance perspective, because I've listened to a lot of true crime podcasts and all that, and I've heard stories where my vengeance wants me to get revenge, but that's just emotional reasoning. And once I thought deeper about it, I think giving criminals an easy way out by killing them, I think is almost the easier way out. I think it's more vengeful to have them live and think about their crime.
My thoughts are this. Murder in Canada is illegal, as it should be. Of course it is. But in countries with the death penalty, you have the state telling people, you can't kill people. It's illegal.
But
and yet the state is turning around and killing people. So I don't think the state... I believe the state should be in the business of preventing murder. I do not think the state should be in the business of murdering. I think it sends sort of a mixed message.
Yeah. I think that it's perfectly fine to have them live out their days in a government-run facility. And I think it saves money in the end, because, like, even with the appeal process that exists with death penalties right now, there's still innocent people that get through, and there's still innocent people that have been killed, theoretically.
I think what's fucked is that we have a national discourse on the death penalty, while at the same time that discourse is saying doctor-assisted dying is wrong, and particularly doctor-assisted dying for the mentally ill. I mean, I've long been a proponent of it, and I work in the healthcare system with a lot of people who've expressed the desire to use doctor-assisted dying. I think it's silly that in a state the same people who are saying, yeah, perhaps we would have the death penalty are people who are fighting against doctor-assisted dying.
But all life is sacred, except for when you break the law.
Here's the thing about that, and this is a question that I've asked some of my pro-life friends lately, is that you believe that an embryo is the same as a full-grown baby. Correct. That's what
they think.
That's what they think. Then I would say to them, you have to make one choice. You have to pick one choice. Would you choose to kill one baby or 1,000 embryos? And if they answer anything other than
1,000 embryos,
they are admitting that they do not value the embryos as highly as they as highly as they do the baby.
Yeah.
I just think it's a useful hook so they can emotionally reason with whoever they're arguing with. Because if they can call it a baby, they can call you a baby killer, and then...
Well, you can't argue with them, because in order to argue with anyone, first of all, you must agree to terms. You have to define the terms that you're going to be arguing on. And with a pro-lifer, you cannot define the term baby. And you can find no medical textbook in the world that calls a fetus a baby.
No.
Ever. Anywhere.
Even when I was pregnant, it was a fetus until it was out of my body.
Yep.
Then it was a baby.
And they insist that it's killing babies, which is absurd. That's like saying killing the egg on the farm killed my chicken dinner a year later.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
Well, even from a public health perspective, like you can make abortion illegal, or you can even make prostitution illegal. People are still going to pay for sex. People are still going to go for abortions. If you want public health to be high, you should regulate those things and make sure they're run right, because people are going to do them anyways. Do you want to
do them unsafely?
Yeah. Do you want it in a facility, or do you want it with a coat hanger, or just by taking a whole shitload of drugs and hoping it kills the baby?
Harm reduction works every time.
Yes.
Criminalization works none of the time.
I agree.
So, to cap off, that was Agent Orange. Do either of you have any comments, questions, queries, concerns, statements, or outbursts?
Oh. Well, I always have outbursts, but I don't think I have any questions about it. Like, I learned a lot about it.
Oh, stay tuned for the Aftershow. It's where we let our hair down, relax a bit, and take care of some Aftershow stuff. And playing us out for the palate cleanser this week, it's a little band called Moonflow from Boston, Massachusetts, and their song, Lines Along the River's Edge. Enjoy.
line along the river's edge, and a trail of footsteps that won't return. There's a line along the river's edge that will be washed away tomorrow. river's edge, where the carmine silt meets the water and stains the surface with crimson clouds that will be washed away tomorrow. And you close your eyes and you block your ears, as if when their shutters are sealed, there's nothing beyond these walls.
Well, we had a little contest on our Facebook page, and basically the contest was if you share the page and you comment on a certain status that we put up, the winner would be able to pick a topic for the episode of their choice. Only one person entered. You know, we're a new podcast. We're still fledgling. We are still working on that fan involvement stuff. But one person entered, and it was Carmen. Carmen, one of our lovely patrons. Right from the start, she was our patron. Now, only one person entered, but since we are goddamn professionals on this fucking podcast, we're going to do this right. So I'm just going to write her name down on this piece of paper. Alrighty, Kate, I'm gonna put it in this bowl and just make sure it's really mixed up. Okay, and the winner of the Pick Your Episode sweepstakes, where you will be able to force the host to do an episode of your choice, is Carmen! Oh, who could have picked that? And because of the magic of the show here, we will be able to peer into the future and see what episode she would want us to play. Here's a voicemail from the future. The audio quality is a little rough, so just bear with us.
Hi, Leon, Sage, and Ood. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to pick a topic for you. I thought you might be interested in our local satanic panic we had in a small town nearby where I live in Martinsville, Saskatchewan. It started out small, but ended up implicating several people. It's quite a strange story that I think your listeners will be interested in. Thank you.
And of course, what Carmen refers to there is our very own Martinsville satanic sex panic, satanic panic storm. Similar to the McMartin preschool trial, except a little more Canadian and a little more local. In fact, the town that it happened in lives only about 30 minutes away from me. Perhaps we'll be able to get some locals to even weigh in on the episode. So thank you for the fantastic suggestion, Carmen. Until next time, I've been Ood with the Aftershow. See you next week.